The sea has always been both a mirror and a mystery. To look out across a stretch of open water is to gaze into something endless, something that invites dreams and fears in equal measure. Its waves roll gently, lulling the senses into calm, yet within its depths lie histories too vast to ever fully uncover. For centuries, men and women have set sail into these waters, carried by ambition, necessity, or wanderlust. Many returned to tell their stories, yet some vanished entirely, leaving behind only fragments, an empty vessel, a drifting shadow, or whispers that reach us through rumor and tale. In this way, the sea has become not just a stage for adventure, but a resting place for mysteries that still stir our imagination. Tonight, as we settle into this gentle voyage, we step softly into that world of forgotten ghost ships. These are not tales of terror to quicken the pulse, but stories to drift alongside us like calm waves at twilight. Each ship we will visit is more than a wooden hull or iron frame. It is a keeper of memory, a vessel that has outlasted its purpose and become something else entirely. Some of these stories are documented in the records of courts, sailors, and newspapers. Others come to us through folklore, passed down by seafarers who swore they saw a phantom vessel vanish into mist. All of them belong to the strange twilight between fact and legend, where the line between history and imagination dissolves like salt in water. Imagine the sound of a harbor at night centuries ago. The creak of wood against rope, the faint splash of oars, and the low murmur of sailors preparing for another uncertain journey. The sea promised riches and discoveries, but it also carried the ever-present risk of disappearance. Storms could strike without warning, navigation could falter, or conflict could spill across the waves. For those left behind, the absence of ship often felt like a wound that never closed. And when, years later, an abandoned vessel reappeared on distant waters, questions rushed in like the tide. What happened to its crew? Why was it adrift? Was it cursed? Or had something far stranger taken place? The phenomenon of the ghost ship draws us in because it is both familiar and impossible. A ship is a human creation, which shaped by hands, sails cut by skill, cargo loaded by bustling effort. Yet when a ship drifts alone, without the voices of its sailors or the direction of its captain, it takes on a new identity. It is no longer an instrument of purpose, but a symbol of absence. To see one is to glimpse human endeavor without the humans themselves, a hollow reminder of how fragile presence can be upon the immensity of the sea. The ocean itself deepens this mystery. It is a realm we can never truly possess. Unlike land, it leaves little permanent trace of us. Ships that vanish into it may never return. Those that do often carry silence as their only cargo. This tension between the sea as a giver of life and the sea as a devourer of it makes every ghost ship story feel like both a history lesson and a ghostly visitation. They remind us that nature itself can be both host and destroyer, that the same calm waters which soothe us now could one day hold our own forgotten relics. As we begin this journey together, it helps to think of ghost ships not as horrors, but as quiet storytellers. They drift toward us out of time, bearing questions instead of answers. Each one allows us to imagine different possibilities: sudden tragedy, hidden crime, supernatural curse, or perhaps just the quiet inevitability of fate. In truth, no explanation is ever enough to dissolve their mystery, which is precisely why they endure. Their silence is their strength, their unanswered riddle the very reason we cannot forget them. This documentary will sail carefully through these waters, balancing history and legend, fact and mystery. We will meet the Mary Celeste, whose empty deck puzzled investigators in the 19th century. We will pass through the icy silence of the Octavius, a ship said to be found with its crew frozen at their posts. We will look upon the enduring wanderings of the SS Bachamo, sighted again and again after its abandonment. And we will touch upon the myths of vessels like the Flying Dutchman, which belong as much to imagination as to sea spray. Each ship carries with it both truth and story, and each one belongs to the vast library of the ocean's memory. For now, picture yourself standing at the edge of a shore, listening to the tide. The horizon stretches endlessly, as if inviting you into its depths. Somewhere out there, beyond sight, forgotten ships drift still, their timbers soaked with history, their sails torn but not destroyed. They belong neither wholly to the past nor fully to the present. They belong instead to the eternal night of the sea, where stories wait to be told and retold in whispers. And so, with calm hearts and open curiosity, let us set sail into the forgotten seas, where ghost ships linger like echoes, guiding us into the gentle mysteries of history that cradle us, not to startle, but to soothe. The sea is not only water. It is a keeper of memories, a vast library of human stories written on waves and erased by storms. Every ripple that touches the shore carries with it echoes of those who once sailed across the horizon and never returned. Unlike a book or a monument, the sea does not preserve stories in a form we can easily read. Instead, it offers fragments, an abandoned mast drifting ashore, a logbook water-stained and half-legible, or the eerie sight of a vessel afloat with no living soul aboard. These fragments ignite the imagination in ways that complete histories never can. It is this incompleteness, this unresolved silence, that makes ghost ships such enduring companions to our collective curiosity. When we hear a ghost ship, we are not simply thinking of wood and sails or rusting iron and steel. We are, at a deeper level, imagining the lives once present upon that deck. The laughter of a crew sharing a meal, the careful navigation of a captain studying the stars, the daily rhythm of labor that once gave purpose to every rope and beam, all of it suddenly gone. What remains is a stage without actors, a theater left in mid-performance. That absence becomes haunting, not because it threatens us, but because it reminds us of how fragile human presence can be in the face of nature's immensity. History has preserved countless records of shipwrecks, storms that shattered hulls, naval battles that sank fleets, errors in navigation that dashed vessels upon unseen reefs. These tragedies are often tragic, but they have explanations. Ghost ships, by contrast, resist explanation. They are ships not destroyed, but abandoned. They float intact, their stories hidden behind locked doors and unanswered questions. This makes them not just wrecks, but riddles. And riddles, especially those the sea refuses to solve, linger in the imagination long after ordinary accounts fade. Sailors have always lived with this tension between the known and the unknown. Life at sea was harsh, but it was also governed by ritual, superstition, and story. A sudden disappearance was never merely an accident. It was often seen as an omen or a curse. The sight of an empty ship adrift on the horizon could terrify even the most seasoned mariners. To encounter such a vessel was to confront the possibility that the sea could take not only lives, but explanations as well. Sailors whispered that these vessels were haunted, crewed by spirits who could not find rest. Others said they were warnings, messages from the deep meant to remind mortals of their smallness against the ocean's vastness. Folklore is filled with ghost ships that never were, yet somehow feel just as real as those that truly existed. The Flying Dutchman, doomed to sail forever without landfall, became a legend across centuries and oceans. To glimpse, it was said to foretell doom. Other tales spoke of cursed wedding parties or ships that appeared on stormy nights as spectral warnings. These stories traveled with sailors from port to port, weaving myth into the fabric of daily life. Even when the legends were told in jest or as entertainment, they carried an undertone of respect, for no one at sea doubted the ocean's ability to create mysteries far stranger than fiction. At the same time, the fascination with ghost ships reveals something tender about human memory. We are drawn to stories that leave room for imagination, for what we cannot fully know. The absence of a crew on a drifting vessel allows us to wonder. Did they escape in lifeboats, or were they swallowed by a storm? Were they victims of violence, Or did something stranger occur? In asking these questions, we're not only pondering the past, but also acknowledging the limits of our own knowledge. The ghost ship becomes a mirror of our desire to fill silence with story, to transform uncertainty into narrative. There's also something dreamlike about ghost ships that makes them especially suited to the quiet hours of reflection. In dreams, places appear without people, and familiar objects seem to hold hidden meanings. To imagine a ship without its sailors is to step into that dreamlike state, where everything is recognizable yet slightly unreal. The mast still rises, the sails still hang, but they no longer serve their purpose. Instead, they become symbols. The ship becomes a drifting question, an object that has slipped from practical use into the realm of myth. It is worth remembering that the sea is constantly moving, erasing, and reshaping itself. Land holds the ruins of castles and cities, which remind us of what once was. The sea, by contrast, keeps its ruins hidden beneath shifting currents. Most wrecks are lost to us, lying silent on the ocean floor. Ghost ships, then, are rare interruptions, glimpses of stories that the sea allows to surface. They're exceptions, like notes passed back from the deep. This rarity makes them precious, for they remind us that the ocean, though vast and indifferent, occasionally returns our gaze. As we reflect on why ghost ships haunt us, we come to see that they are more than maritime curiosities. They are metaphors for the fragile hold we have on permanence, the way human effort can vanish in the face of larger forces. A house abandoned on land crumbles slowly, but we can see its decay and know its cause. A ship adrift, intact yet empty, offers no such clarity. It is mystery itself, afloat on waters that carry it far from its origins, leaving us with more questions than answers. This haunting quality is not one of fear, but of wonder. Ghost ships remind us that not every story is meant to be closed. Some remain open, like a book with missing chapters, inviting us to imagine endings of our own. In that sense, they are gentle teachers. They remind us that the unknown need not always be unsettling. It can also be calming, like watching the horizon and knowing we will never fully measure its distance. And so, as we sail further into this documentary, we will carry with us this sense of duality. The ghost ship as both absence and presence, both history and imagination. It is this duality that makes them endure. We will next step into one of the most famous of these mysteries, a ship whose name has become almost synonymous with ghostly abandon, the Mary Celeste. Its story will carry us deeper into the heart of this maritime riddle, showing us how fact and speculation intertwine upon the quiet, rolling waves. When we think of ghost ships, one name seems to rise above the rest, carried across oceans and generations like a whisper that refuses to fade, the Mary Celeste. It is not simply another tale of disappearance at sea, but the very image of the abandoned vessel that enters our minds whenever we hear the phrase ghost ship. Her story begins not in mystery, but in routine. An ordinary voyage across the Atlantic in 1872, undertaken by experienced sailors aboard a sturdy brigantine. Yet it is precisely the ordinariness of the beginning that makes what followed so haunting. The Mary Celeste left New York on November 7th, 1872, bound for Genoa, Italy. She was carrying a cargo of industrial alcohol, carefully sealed and stored below deck. Her captain, Benjamin Briggs, was a man of good reputation, known for his caution and skill. Alongside him were 7 crewmen, all capable seafarers, and his wife and young daughter, who had joined him for this transatlantic journey. By all accounts, the ship was seaworthy, the cargo valuable, and the voyage expected to be uneventful. Yet less than a month later, the ship was found adrift in the mid-Atlantic with not a soul aboard. The discovery was made by another vessel, the Dei Grazia, on December 4th, 1872. Her crew spotted the Mary Celeste sailing aimlessly, sails partially set, her course unsteady. At first, they expected she might be in distress, her crew perhaps ill or in need of assistance. But when they boarded her, they encountered something far stranger. The ship was in perfectly serviceable condition. The hull was intact, the cargo untouched, and provisions sufficient for 6 months remained. The personal belongings of the crew, from clothing to instruments, were undisturbed. Yet there was no trace of Captain Briggs, his family, or the sailors who had set out with him. It was as if they had stepped off the ship and vanished in a thin air. Even the details of what was found seemed to deepen rather than ease the mystery. The ship's logbook had been updated until just days before, recording nothing unusual. The last entry suggested the vessel was near the Azores, far from perilous waters. The lifeboat, however, was missing. This clue hinted at an orderly abandonment, yet no distress signal had been sent, and no reason for departure was apparent. Why would a competent captain, with his wife and child aboard, order his crew into a small boat when a larger ship was clearly safe? The sea offered no answers. Speculation arose immediately, and it has never truly ceased. Some suggested piracy, yet the cargo and valuables remained untouched. Others imagined mutiny, though there was no sign of violence. There were whispers of a sudden storm or a waterspout frightening the crew into fleeing temporarily, only for the lifeboat to be lost. Still others turned to the cargo, suggesting the possibility of alcohol fumes leaking, creating fear of explosion and driving the crew to abandon ship in haste. Each theory carries a certain logic, yet none explains why an experienced captain would leave behind the security of his vessel. The lifeboat's absence is both the simplest and the most perplexing clue, offering a possibility while withholding the truth. The court of inquiry held in Gibraltar after the discovery of the ship could reach no definitive conclusion. The de Grazia's crew, who had salvaged the Mary Celeste and brought her port, were questioned extensively, even suspected of foul play. Yet no evidence implicated them, and the mystery remained unresolved. The Mary Celeste herself would continue sailing for years under new ownership, but she never escaped the shadow of her ghostly reputation. Her name became a symbol, invoked whenever a ship was found abandoned or a tale of the sea seemed too strange to explain. Part of the haunting power of the Mary Celeste lies in her human dimension. Unlike legends born purely of folklore, this was a real vessel, with real people whose names we know. Captain Briggs, his wife Sarah, and their young daughter Sophia were not faceless figures. They were a family, full of the same hopes and routines as any family undertaking a long journey. Their disappearance leaves behind not just an empty deck, but an empty place in history where their lives should have continued. That absence is what turns the Mary Celeste from an event into a mystery that feels personal. Writers and storytellers seized upon the tale almost immediately, weaving it into fiction, poetry, and rumor. Arthur Conan Doyle, long before creating Sherlock Holmes, penned a short story inspired by the ship, embellishing and altering details to heighten its mystery. His version helped cement the legend, ensuring that the Mary Celeste would drift not only upon waters, but also through the imagination of generations. In time, the line between fact and invention blurred, with public memory holding onto the haunting image of the empty vessel more strongly than the sober facts of the case. What makes the Mary Celeste endure is not the absence of answers alone, but the way those unanswered questions echo across time. We can picture the ship clearly, sails slack in the wind, deck silent, a cabin where a child's toys lay undisturbed. We can picture the lifeboat lowered carefully into the sea, but we cannot follow it, cannot know where it went or why. The Atlantic, vast and indifferent, swallowed whatever ending the story had. What remains is a fragment, and it is the fragment that haunts us most. When we pause to consider why the Mary Celeste captures imagination more than so many other maritime puzzles, it may be because she embodies both extremes at once: complete normalcy and utter mystery. Everything about the voyage was ordinary, until suddenly, impossibly, it was not. A working ship, a skilled crew, a family together, all gone, without storm, without wreck, without battle. It is this collision of the familiar and the inexplicable that makes the tale resonate, like a sudden silence in the midst of a song. The Mary Celeste reminds us that not all mysteries are buried in distant folklore or icy depths. Some arise in plain daylight, recorded in courts, logged in newspapers, remembered by witnesses. And yet, for all the documentation, for all the scrutiny, the heart of the mystery remains untouched. Perhaps that is why, more than a century later, her story is still told at harbors and by firesides, still written about, still whispered across the quiet hours of the night. As our voyage continues, we will leave the Mary Celeste adrift in her endless silence, a ghost ship forever sailing in memory. Yet she is only the beginning, the best known, but not the only vessel to vanish from within. From her empty deck, we move onward, into seas where other ships, some real, some legendary, wait to be remembered. Next, we will drift into the icy stillness of the Octavius, a ship said to be found locked in frozen time, its crew preserved by the cold, their silence deeper than the sea itself. The Mary Celeste leaves us standing at the threshold of history and legend. On one side, there are the hard facts, a real ship, court documents, sworn testimonies, the log of a captain whose handwriting we can still trace. On the other, there is an emptiness that facts cannot fill, a silence into which theories, folklore, and imagination rush like wind through an open hatch. That balance, between what we can know and what we cannot, creates the lingering presence of a ghost ship. It becomes more than a vessel without a crew. It becomes a vessel for mystery itself. As we drift away from the Mary Celeste, the sea seems to darken, not with storm clouds, but with questions. How much of what we hear about ghost ships belongs to truth, and how much to the stories we tell to ease the discomfort of unanswered riddles? Even the Mary Celeste, carefully investigated and recorded, has been reshaped over the years by rumor and fiction until her true form is wrapped in layers of invention. In this way, ghost ships remind us that the ocean is not only a physical frontier, but also a frontier of the imagination, a place where facts and folklore are carried along the same currents. The human mind does not rest easily with gaps. When something disappears without explanation, we fill the void with possibilities. Some of these possibilities lean toward reason: cargo hazards, storms, navigational errors. Others lean toward the uncanny: curses, spirits, ships doomed to sail without end. Both approaches are attempts to soothe the discomfort of not knowing. Yet, at their heart, ghost ship tales remind us that the ocean resists being fully explained. It gives just enough evidence to spark a trail, then washes the rest away into silence. It is here, in this space between what is recorded and what is imagined, that the stories of other ghost ships take shape. Some are almost certainly inventions, stories repeated and reshaped until they became legends accepted as truth. Others may have had a kernel of reality, later obscured by exaggeration or the simple erosion of detail over time. And some, like the Mary Celeste, were undeniably real but remain forever incomplete. Together, they form a constellation of mysteries across the waters, points of light and shadow guiding our thoughts as stars once guided sailors. As we move deeper into this voyage, we shift from the clarity of a courtroom record into the softer, more uncertain glow of legend. We leave behind the relatively firm deck of the Mary Celeste and step into waters where history and story mingle inseparably. It is a transition from the bright shoreline of fact into the twilight where tales drift, half anchored in truth, half adrift in myth. Yet even here, in this uncertainty, there's a quiet reassurance. Ghost ships do not ask us to solve them. They ask us to listen, to imagine, and to carry their echoes forward. The next vessel we encounter, the Octavius, lies firmly in this realm between known and unknown. Said to have been discovered in the late 18th century, locked fast in Arctic ice, her crew frozen in place as though caught mid-motion, she is a story both chilling and strangely peaceful. Unlike the Mary Celeste, there are no court records, No official inquiries, no documents to consult. There is only the tale passed down, repeated across generations. A ship found drifting through frozen silence, a captain's log ending in a hand grown still, and a crew preserved by the cold, as if in eternal slumber. If the Mary Celeste represents the mystery of the vanished, the Octavius represents the mystery of time suspended. Both belong to the sea's library, but they speak in different tones, one in absence, the other in stillness. Together, they remind us that the ocean holds more than one kind of silence, and more than one way to haunt the imagination. And so, with the Mary Celeste fading into the horizon of memory, let us sail on toward the Octavius, into the icy north where frozen seas preserve their secrets with a stillness deeper than night. The sea tells many stories, but none feel quite as haunting as those whispered from the frozen reaches of the north. Here, where ice meets horizon and night lingers long, time itself seems to pause. It is in this landscape that one of the most chilling ghost ship tales emerges, the story of the Octavius. Whether truth or legend, its image has remained vivid for centuries. A ship found drifting through Arctic silence, her crew frozen in place as though life had been halted mid-breath, the final moment of their voyage suspended forever. The first known telling places the discovery of the Octavius in 1775. The whaling ship Herald, sailing off the coast of Greenland, is said to have spotted a vessel motionless amid the drifting ice. From a distance, the ship appeared derelict, her rigging loose, her sails in tatters, but her hull intact. Approaching cautiously, the sailors of the Herald boarded the vessel. What they found would leave an imprint on maritime folklore for generations. The decks were eerily silent, yet not abandoned. Below, in the captain's cabin, sat a man at his desk, frozen solid, his pen still in hand as though caught in the very act of writing. His logbook, open before him, bore the date 1762, 13 years earlier. Around the ship, more bodies were found, crewmen in their bunks, wrapped in blankets, frozen where sleep had overtaken them. Even the captain's wife and child were said to be among the preserved dead, locked in the cold embrace of time. The Octavius, if the tale is to be believed, had been drifting for over a decade, carrying her silent passengers across the Arctic wastes. The logbook offered another layer of strangeness. According to some versions of the story, the captain had attempted to navigate the fabled Northwest Passage, the treacherous route that could, in theory, link the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans through Arctic waters. At the time, this was one of exploration's greatest ambitions, yet also its deadliest gamble. If the Octavius had indeed attempted the passage, she may have succeeded in crossing from west to east, only to become trapped in ice, sealing the fate of all aboard. The log's final entry, cut short, is often imagined as a voice silenced mid-thought, the pen slipping from a hand stiffened by the cold. The atmosphere of the tale lingers like frost. A ship full of people, stilled not by battle or storm, but by the slow inevitability of freezing air. Unlike the Mary Celeste, where the absence of the crew left only questions, the Octavius offers a more chilling tableau. The presence of the crew, but lifeless, caught forever in their last gestures. There is something deeply unsettling about the idea of walking a ship where men still sit at their posts, not gone but preserved, their silence deeper than the sea itself. But as with many stories of the sea, questions rise about the Octavius. Some historians doubt she ever existed, suggesting the tale may have grown from a mix of truth and embellishment. Ships were often lost in Arctic exploration, and frozen bodies were sometimes found years later, lending credibility to the idea. Yet no records exist of the Octavius in shipping logs, no ownership details, no definitive evidence of her voyage. Like the ice that shifts and conceals, the truth remains hidden beneath layers of retelling. Still, the story endures because it carries something more than historical detail. It embodies the fear and awe of the polar world, where survival hangs by a thread and the environment itself becomes an adversary. The Octavius is less a record than a vision. A ship sailing through endless cold, its crew forever silent, its captain forever bent over a page that will never be finished. It becomes, in effect, a floating monument to human ambition and its limits. For those who dream of the sea, the Octavius speaks to the allure of the Northwest Passage itself. For centuries, explorers sought it, believing it to be the golden route that would unite East and West in trade. Yet again and again, expeditions perished in the attempt. The Octavius, whether real or imagined, fits perfectly into this narrative, a ship that perhaps succeeded in the crossing, only to pay the ultimate price. In that sense, she becomes both triumph and tragedy, proof that the passage could be taken and warning that it could not be survived. There's also a strange serenity to the Octavius. To imagine her drifting quietly through the Arctic, her passengers still aboard, is to picture a ship not destroyed but stilled, like a painting frozen in ice. The image is haunting, yes, but also oddly peaceful. Unlike storms that tear ships apart or fires that consume them, the cold preserves. It turns wood brittle and skin pale, but it holds form intact. The Octavius, if she existed, was not wrecked so much as suspended, caught in time's slow embrace. As with all ghost ship tales, the Octavius also reflects the human need to transform uncertainty into story. Even if the tale began as rumor, its persistence reveals how deeply it resonates. The image of frozen sailors speaks to our own fear of time stopping, of life paused without conclusion. The captain's unfinished log becomes a metaphor for all stories cut short, all journeys ended before their destination. We see ourselves in these fragments, and in that recognition, the legend endures. Whether she sailed in truth or only in imagination, the Octavius has become part of the ocean's memory. Her story drifts like ice itself, sometimes sharp and solid, sometimes melting into mist, always returning in whispers. For more than 2 centuries, she has reminded us that the Arctic holds secrets too deep for certainty. And perhaps it is better this way, that some ships remain half real, half legend, for in their mystery lies their power. From the frozen decks of the Octavius, our journey turns toward another kind of ghost ship, not one bound in ice, but one bound in the realm of story and superstition. If the Octavius embodies the silence of frozen time, the next vessels we will meet embody the visions conjured by storm and fear, ships that sailors swore they saw but could never quite touch. These are the ghost ships of folklore, eternal wanderers on seas both real and imagined, where myth and memory drift side by side. The sea is vast, mysterious, and endlessly shifting. It hides more than it reveals, and sailors, adrift upon its rolling waters, have always filled the spaces of uncertainty with stories. Where knowledge ends, imagination begins, and nowhere is this more apparent than in the tales of ghost ships born from folklore. These are not ships like the Mary Celeste or the Octavius, tied to fragments of fact and traceable records. Instead, they live in a more fluid space, part warning, part omen, part dream. They are ships that appear out of mist and storm, sailing where no vessel should be, dissolving back into shadow before a hand can reach their hull. Among them, one name rises above all others, the Flying Dutchman. The Flying Dutchman is perhaps the most famous of all ghost ships, a vessel doomed to sail the seas forever, never reaching shore. According to legend, her captain defied the elements, swearing he would round the Cape of Good Hope even if it took him until Judgment Day. The sea, unforgiving and infinite, took him at his word. From then on, the ship was cursed, condemned to wander endlessly, her crew reduced to phantoms, her sails glowing faintly in the storm. To see her was said to be an omen of disaster, a glimpse of eternity where mortal lives flicker like candle flames. The earliest versions of the Flying Dutchman tale appear in the 17th century, when European trade routes stretched to the far corners of the world. Sailors battling the unpredictable waters of the Cape of Good Hope faced some of the most violent seas known. Waves could tower higher than ships. Winds could turn from calm to deadly in minutes, and dense fogs obscured even the nearest horizon. In such conditions, fear found its outlet in stories. A ship glimpsed in the distance, then lost in mist, became more than just a vessel. It became a vision. Sailors claimed that the Flying Dutchman appeared with ghostly lights, her crew pale and skeletal, her sails billowing though no wind blew. The legend spread quickly, and soon it was not only a maritime tale, but also a cultural touchstone. Writers, poets, and even opera composers drew upon the haunting imagery of the Dutchman, embedding him into the imagination of Europe. Yet, for sailors, the tale retained a darker weight. To encounter the Dutchman at sea was to invite misfortune, storms, shipwrecks, or death. He was not merely a ghost ship, but a harbinger, a messenger from the edge of existence itself. But the Flying Dutchman is not alone in this realm of spectral folklore. Around the coasts of Europe and beyond, stories of phantom vessels abound, each colored by the fears and beliefs of the people who told them. In Scandinavia, sailors whispered of ships manned by the dead, their decks filled with drowned souls destined never to rest. These vessels were sometimes said to carry cargoes of plague, spreading sickness wherever their shadows touched. In the British Isles, tales arose of spectral longships gliding silently across moonlit waters, reminders of ancient Viking raids that once brought terror to coastal villages. Further afield, in the Caribbean, sailors told of ghostly galleons, remnants of the age of piracy, sailing with tattered sails and no visible crew. These were said to be the ships of pirates, cursed for their cruelty, doomed to wander the warm seas that had once made them rich. To spot such a ship was to feel the weight of history pressing close, a reminder that greed and violence leave marks not easily erased, even by death. What all these tales share is a blending of the real and the unreal. Ships were often sighted in strange conditions, at twilight, through heavy fog, during storms when lightning flashed and revealed fleeting shapes on the horizon. Human eyes, strained by fatigue and fear, turned shadows into sails and waves into hulls. Yet what began as mistaken sightings became layered with meaning, passed from one generation of sailors to the next until the visions were no longer illusions but legends. The ghost ships of folklore serve another purpose as well. They embody the loneliness of the sea. To sail far from land is to be reminded of one's fragility, of how small a wooden vessel is against the weight of an ocean. Ghost ships magnify this feeling, showing sailors their own fates reflected back at them. Endless drifting, no safe harbor, no return. They're the nightmares of seafarers given form, drifting reminders of what lies beyond human control. Yet curiously, there's also a strange comfort in these legends. They make the incomprehensible familiar, giving a face to the chaos of storms and the silence of the horizon. Instead of facing the unknown void, sailors imagined a ship. Instead of empty sea, they conjured stories. These tales filled the silence with meaning, allowing fear to become narrative and narrative to become memory. Among all these phantom vessels, the Flying Dutchman remains the most enduring. Reported sightings continued well into the 19th and 20th centuries, even as ships became powered by steam rather than sails. Notable among them is the claim that Prince George of Wales, later King George V of England, saw the Flying Dutchman in 1881 during a naval exercise. He and his shipmates recorded the sighting in their log, describing a ghostly ship glowing red in the early morning light. Such accounts ensured that the legend survived, bridging the gap between folklore and recorded history. But whether the Dutchman or his spectral kin ever truly existed matters less than the feeling they evoke. They are emblems of uncertainty, symbols of the boundary between what is known and what lies just beyond perception. They remind us that the sea, for all our maps and instruments, remains untamed, its mysteries as wide as the horizon. As we drift onward through this journey of forgotten ghost ships, the folkloric phantoms prepare the way for another category altogether. Those vessels that rest not in legend alone, but in the wrecks that still lie beneath the waves. For beyond the tales of glowing sails and endless voyages, there are ships whose final resting places can still be found, their bones lying silent on the ocean floor, their stories etched in rust and coral. The ocean floor is a graveyard, vast and silent. Unlike the ships of folklore, conjured from mist and fear, the vessels that rest below the waves once had weight, timbers, and crew. They were real, and they sailed with purpose. Yet, in death, they take on the qualities of ghost ships, transformed by time, salt, and silence into haunting relics. To think of them lying beneath layers of shifting currents is to picture memory itself submerged, waiting to be rediscovered. These are not just wrecks. They are echoes, vessels preserved by the sea, as though it too remembers what humans might forget. There's a strange contradiction in these underwater graves. On the one hand, they are still, stripped of motion, the journeys they began forever halted. On the other, they feel alive, reefs forming around their hulls, fish weaving through their broken ribs, currents humming through empty corridors. They have not vanished, but become something different, half ship, half seascape, liminal entities that carry the shadows of their former lives. To divers who visit them, the sensation is overwhelming. It is not only history they descend into, but a presence, a feeling that something remains in the stillness of these wrecks, something almost watching. Consider the Titanic, perhaps the most famous shipwreck in human memory. Though not a ghost ship in the traditional sense, its story embodies the same essence. Once proud and filled with light, the Titanic now lies broken in the deep, its decks collapsed, its bow buried in silt. Yet the wreck radiates a quiet power. Photographs of its silent hull strike viewers with a sense of awe and unease, as though the ship itself still mourns the lives it carried. To gaze upon its remains is to feel history's breath in the water, a reminder of how fragile grandeur can be. The Titanic is not seen drifting across the waves, but her ghost lives in the minds of all who know her tale. Beyond the Titanic, countless other relics rest beneath the sea, each with its own spectral aura. In the Mediterranean, Roman and Greek ships lie buried beneath centuries of sediment, amphories scattered like whispers of ancient trade. In the Pacific, remnants of war, Japanese battleships, American carriers, remain as underwater tombs, their crews entombed within. To descend into such places is to feel history close at hand, the silence heavy with the weight of memory. Divers often describe the sensation as uncanny, as though the wrecks still belong to the world above, reluctant to yield fully to the sea. Some wrecks inspire legends of their own. The SS Valencia, for example, sank off the coast of Vancouver Island in 1906, leaving behind one of the most enduring maritime ghost stories. Survivors claimed the wreck remained visible for years, clinging stubbornly to the rocks, its shattered hull battered by waves. But the ghostly aspect came later, when sailors swore they saw the ship still drifting near the island long after it had been lost, its decks crowded with phantom figures. The Valencia exists both as a real wreck and as a phantom sighting, bridging the space between history and myth. Wrecks beneath the waves also have a peculiar ability to transform with time, their material decay adding to their ghostliness. Iron corrodes, wood softens, yet their forms often remain recognizable. Ships that appear alive but hollowed, skeletal remains that echo their former shapes. They become more than artifacts. They become symbols. Each collapsed mast and rusted porthole whispers of journeys interrupted, of lives caught in the turning tides of fate. The silence of these wrecks is perhaps the most haunting quality. Above the waves, ships are filled with sound. Creaking timbers, snapping sails, voices calling orders. Below, all is muted. A diver hovers in the wreck of a once busy vessel and hears only the muffled rush of water. The absence of sound amplifies the sense of presence, as though the ship remembers but cannot speak. This stillness is what makes sunken relics feel ghostly, a suspension between what was and what is. And yet, there is beauty here too. Coral blooms upon the decks of ships that once cut across the sea's surface. Schools of fish swirl where cannons once stood. Nature does not simply erase these vessels. It reshapes them, weaving them into the living fabric of the sea. The result is both haunting and tender, a reminder that even in ruin, there is transformation. Ghost ships beneath the waves are not merely markers of tragedy, but also part of the ocean's cycle of renewal. To speak of sunken relics is to acknowledge the duality of the sea. It takes, but it also preserves. Where land consumes ruins, the sea often holds them, sealed away, almost timeless. For historians, these wrecks are treasure troves of knowledge. For storytellers, they are wells of mystery. For dreamers, they are places where the past lingers close, where one might almost hear the voices of sailors long gone. As we surface from these underwater graves, our path through ghost ship lore changes once again. From the stillness of wrecks, we turn toward the places where legends cling most strongly, coastal communities, where ghost ships are not only remembered, but sometimes still seen. Here, along the edge of land and sea, stories drift ashore with the tide, reminding us that the boundary between the living and the spectral is never far from sight. For those who have never set foot on a ship, the sea can still whisper its mysteries from the safety of shoreline. The coast is the threshold between two worlds, the stable land and the unpredictable waters beyond. It is here, standing on cliffs or walking along quiet beaches, that people claim to glimpse phantom vessels rising from mist or fading into twilight. Unlike the ghost ships of open waters, seen only by sailors adrift, these coastal apparitions belong to all who live near the sea. They are shared visions, woven into the culture of fishing villages and lighthouse towns, part of the rhythm of life where land meets tide. One of the most enduring traditions comes from Scandinavia, where coastal communities tell of ghostly ships sailing close to shore, their lanterns glowing faintly across dark waters. These vessels, sometimes called death ships, were said to appear before storms or as omens of drowning. To spot one was a warning. The sea was about to take someone from the community. In this way, the ghost ship was not merely a haunting, but a kind of messenger, tying the fate of land dwellers to the restless waters. The people, though fearful, learned to listen. The sight of phantom sails was folded into their understanding of the sea's moods, a reminder that its power extended beyond the horizon. In Britain, too, coastal legends of phantom vessels are plentiful. One tale, often told along the shores of Devon, speaks of a ghostly armada seen gliding silently across the waves. Witnesses described countless ships moving together in unison, their sails glowing faintly, their forms dissolving as soon as one looked too closely. Some believe these were echoes of ancient fleets, Roman or Viking, replaying battles long past. Others thought them warnings of war to come. For centuries, such sightings blurred the line between history and prophecy, the sea carrying images of both past and future across its surface. The American coastline also holds its share of ghost ship legends. Off the coast of Maine, fishermen have long reported sightings of phantom schooners appearing suddenly in the fog. These ships, often described as fully rigged and brightly lit, vanish without a sound or ripple when approached. In one tale, a lighthouse keeper swore he saw a burning ship adrift, its flames licking the rigging. Yet no smoke rose into the air and no wreckage was ever found. Such stories reflect the deep entanglement between seafaring communities and their environment. The ocean provides life, yet it also takes it, and ghost ships become the visible signs of this eternal balance. Perhaps the most famous of these coastal legends is tied to the SS Valencia, wrecked in 1906 off the coast of Vancouver Island. After the disaster, in which over 100 lives were lost, sailors and villagers alike began reporting strange sights near the cliffs. They claimed to see a phantom version of the Valencia, her decks crowded with ghostly passengers, drifting endlessly near the site of her wreck. Some swore that lifeboats filled with spectral figures rowed silently toward the shore, only to vanish before reaching land. For decades, these visions continued, as if the tragedy refused to release its grip on the coastline. To this day, the Valencia is remembered as both a historical wreck and a ghost ship haunting the living. What makes these coastal legends particularly haunting is their accessibility. They are not confined to the lonely experience of sailors on distant voyages, but witnessed by entire communities. Fishermen, lighthouse keepers, villagers gazing out at the horizon. They become collective memories, retold around fires, written into local lore, and passed to each new generation. Unlike tales of distant seas, which might fade into abstraction, these stories are anchored to the land itself. A child standing on the same shore where their grandparents once lived may be told to watch for ghostly sails. And in this way, the legend lives on, woven into the landscape. These coastal sightings also carry a symbolic weight. They often occur in liminal times, dawn, dusk, or storm. The ships emerge in transitional light, when shadows distort and the eye struggles to discern what is real. The coast itself is liminal too, not land, not sea, but a borderland between both. It is perhaps no surprise, then, that so many ghost ships are seen here. The boundary invites visions, blending memory and imagination until the horizon itself seems alive with movement. Skeptics suggest that many of these sightings can be explained by natural phenomena. The phenomenon of the fata morgana, a type of mirage caused by atmospheric refraction, can project distant ships onto the horizon, making them appear ghostly, distorted, or even upside down. Light reflecting on low clouds or fog can also give the illusion of glowing vessels. Yet for those who witnessed these sights, the explanations matter less than the experience. To see a ship where none should be is to feel touched by something beyond explanation, something that stirs the imagination and lodges in the memory. There is a softness, too, in these coastal ghost ships. Unlike the frozen terror of the Octavius or the cursed fate of the Flying Dutchman, the ships seen from shore often feel like quiet reminders. They appear not as threats, but as whispers, fading quickly, leaving behind only wonder. They are stories that drift into dreams, especially in communities where the sound of the tide is a constant companion. They remind us that the sea, vast and unknowable, is also close, brushing against the lives of those who dwell beside it. From these shores, where legends cling to mist and tide, our path will carry us further into the sea's memory. If coastal ghost ships belong to communities, our next journey lies with the solitary figures of the ocean, captains, sailors, and explorers whose encounters with the unknown gave rise to enduring tales. For it is not only ships themselves that become ghosts, but also the men who sailed them, their names carried forward as though they, too, still wander upon the waters. Ghost ships are not only vessels. They are vessels of story, and at the center of many tales is the figure of the captain. The captain is the soul of a ship, the guiding presence whose decisions, courage, and sometimes folly determine the fate of all aboard. When a ship is abandoned or lost, it is often the captain whose name becomes entwined with legend. In folklore, these figures are remembered not simply as historical individuals, but as agents of destiny, cursed by hubris, tragedy, or the unknowable forces of the sea. One of the most enduring patterns in ghost ship lore is the idea of the cursed captain. The Flying Dutchman is the most famous example, a man whose defiance of nature and God condemned him and his crew to wander eternally across the oceans. He is a cautionary figure, a personification of the dangers of pride and obsession. Sailors believe that to glimpse such a captain was to invite misfortune, a reminder that the sea does not forgive recklessness. His punishment was not instantaneous, but perpetual, a slow, unending journey through storms, fog, and isolation, mirroring the very essence of ghost ship existence. Real historical captains have also inspired similar legends. Consider the fate of Captain Briggs of the Mary Celeste. Though history records him as a competent and careful navigator, the mysterious disappearance of his crew, including his wife and child, has cast a shadow over his name for generations. In tales told to harbors and in maritime journals, he sometimes becomes more than a historical figure. He is imagined as a man caught between worlds, a captain whose decisions brought his vessel to the edge of legend. His disappearance, like the vessel itself, is a riddle that invites imagination to fill the gaps left by fact. Curses often serve as a narrative bridge between tragedy and meaning. When a captain's ship vanishes, communities and storytellers may attribute the event to supernatural causes. In some folklore, captains who mistreated their crews, disrespected sacred maritime rituals, or ignored warnings of storm and danger are thought to bring doom upon themselves. Their ships return, or fail to return, not simply due to wind and wave, but because fate itself exacts revenge. These stories are moral in nature, reminding seafarers that the ocean is alive with both physical peril and ethical oversight. Legends also suggest that cursed captains are tied to the continuation of the ghost ship. Their spirits remain aboard, guiding the vessel, unable to leave until their debt to the sea is paid. Accounts of spectral ships often include sightings of figures on deck, sometimes identifiable as the captain. Sailors recount seeing a solitary figure at the helm, staring into the horizon, a phantom presence steering through fog and storm. In this way, the ghost ship is not merely a vessel, but an extension of the captain's fate, carrying the weight of unfinished voyages and unresolved destinies. Beyond curses, there is a psychological element at play. Captains, as leaders, bear immense responsibility. When disaster strikes, whether by storm, accident, or mutiny, it is natural for memory and storytelling to focus on the figure at the top. This human tendency amplifies the narrative of doom, transforming historical events into cautionary tales. By attributing misfortune to the captain's decisions or perceived arrogance, the stories offer a way for communities to make sense of unpredictable tragedies. Some tales emphasize the mysterious aura surrounding a captain's final moments. In Arctic legends of ships like the Octavius, the captain is found frozen over his logbook, a silent witness to the inexorable passage of time. In these stories, the captain becomes both human and symbolic, an individual trapped by circumstance and an embodiment of the unknown forces of nature. The vessel, frozen or adrift, mirrors the stillness or uncertainty of the captain's own fate. It is as if the ghost ship itself is a stage for the captain's lingering presence, a narrative vessel that carries both history and myth. The motif of the cursed captain also intersects with moral reflection. Ghost ships remind us that leadership carries consequences and that choices, however careful, are subject to the whims of the natural world. The captain who defies caution, ignores superstition, or attempts feats beyond human limits often becomes the focus of legend, his story extended into the realm of myth. In this sense, ghost ships are cautionary tales, blending maritime experience with moral lessons. They are reminders that the sea is indifferent, but humans are accountable to the ship, to the crew, and to the traditions that have evolved over centuries. Yet, despite the grim undertones, there is an odd tenderness in these stories. Cursed or doomed, the captains are never entirely forgotten. Their names, their decisions, and their final voyages continue to drift through history, preserved in legend, folklore, and retelling. In imagining the ghostly figure at the helm, we are not only witnessing fate, but honoring memory. The ghost ship becomes a vessel of remembrance, carrying forward the humanity of those who once sailed and those who now haunt the imagination. The legend of the cursed captain prepares us for the next aspect of ghost ships, those vessels whose stories have been shaped by mystery, rumor, and fear, yet are tied closely to documented maritime disasters. From the captain's bridge, we drift to the decks of ships lost in battle, storm, or accident, where every plank, rope, and mast whispers both history and enigma. These are ghost ships whose tales are preserved not solely in myth, but in the overlapping currents of fact and imagination. The sea, vast and untamed, is a realm where human ambition meets the raw forces of nature. Some ghost ships owe their existence not to curses or legend, but to tragedy, the fury of storms, the chaos of battle, or the slow decay of vessels abandoned in perilous waters. These are ships whose stories straddle history and mystery, tangible yet still haunted, tangible yet still unreachable. They remind us that the line between life and disappearance at sea is thin, and that the ocean preserves memory as well as wreckage. Warships have long been fertile ground for ghost ship legends. In battles both historic and obscure, vessels have been lost with their crews, leaving behind haunting traces that persist in maritime folklore. The HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, part of the ill-fated Franklin expedition of the mid-19th century, are prime examples. These ships set out in search of the Northwest Passage and vanished into the Arctic. For decades, the fate of the men and ships remained a mystery. Survivors' bones and artifacts suggested starvation, exposure, and despair. Yet until their wrecks were discovered in the 21st century, these vessels existed primarily as spectral figures in the imagination. They were ghost ships long before they were rediscovered, symbols of both ambition and hubris against the frozen sea. Storms, too, have created vessels destined to drift forever between history and legend. Hurricanes, typhoons, and sudden squalls have claimed countless ships, some of which were later spotted by other sailors without crew. Reports from the Caribbean in the 18th century tell of merchant galleons vanishing during the hurricane season, only to reappear months later, derelict, floating among debris. Crew members missing, cargo intact, the ship itself seemingly adrift, yet alive in some mysterious sense. Sailors often interpreted these sightings as omens, warnings, or glimpses of a world beyond the mortal plane. The sea, relentless and unpredictable, had claimed its toll, and the vessels became ghostly echoes of that reckoning. Naval warfare in particular has produced some of the most haunting ghost ship stories. Battles leave ships wrecked, burned, or stranded, yet tales of their return, or partial return, persist in legend. In the foggy waters off Europe, there are accounts of ghostly fleets appearing centuries after their demise. These spectral armadas, sometimes glowing faintly in moonlight or storm, are said to recreate the chaos of battle, with cannon fire echoing in silence, sails billowing though no wind blows. Such sightings blur the boundary between memory and vision, as if history itself refuses to lie quietly beneath the waves. Even smaller vessels are not immune. Fishing boats, schooners, and coastal traders have vanished in storms, leaving communities bereft. Often, relatives and neighbors report seeing them weeks or months later, sails flickering in the distance, hulls glinting under the sun, yet no one aboard. These apparitions serve as both grief and warning, a reminder of the fragility of life on the water. The ghost ship, in these instances, becomes a bridge between the living and the lost, a vessel that carries memory as much as timber. Nature itself has a way of preserving these tragedies. Cold currents, isolated reefs, and deep ocean trenches hold wrecks suspended, partially hidden yet partially visible to the observant. Sunken masts may protrude above the waves at low tide. Debris may wash ashore, and the play of light on foggy mornings can conjure the illusion of motion where none exists. It is easy to see how reports of ghost ships arise from such circumstances. The combination of environmental forces and human psychology ensures that tragedy becomes story, and story drifts into legend. Consider the legend of the Lady Lovibond, a schooner said to have been wrecked on the Goodwin Sands off England in 1748. According to lore, she appears every 50 years, a ghostly reminder of love and betrayal. While there is scant historical evidence of the ship, the tale persisted among coastal communities and mariners, blending maritime tragedy with folklore. Sightings were reported in foggy conditions, when the imagination could easily fill in details, yet the story endured as if the sea itself insisted on remembering. Here, the intersection of storm, accident, and legend produces a ghost ship that is both moral tale and spectral witness. Even in modern times, tragic losses at sea continue to inspire ghost ship narratives. The disappearance of vessels without trace, especially in storm-prone regions like the North Atlantic or typhoon zones in the Pacific, feeds the imagination. Pilots, sailors, and remote observers sometimes report seeing lights on the water, ships appearing suddenly, only to vanish moments later. These sightings may be optical illusions, atmospheric phenomena, or simple misperceptions, yet they echo the same human fascination with ships lost to storm and circumstance. Each report is part of a larger pattern, a testament to the enduring power of maritime mystery. Warships and storm-battered vessels, in this way, serve as historical reminders and narrative catalysts. They embody both human courage and human vulnerability, ambition and error. They show that the sea is impartial, rewarding skill but punishing hubris. The ghostly presence of these ships, whether factual or imagined, anchors history and memory, ensuring that the sacrifices, mistakes, and endurance of those who sailed them are never forgotten. From the wrecked and storm-tossed decks, our exploration moves toward a quieter, more intimate form of ghost ship, the personal relics and diaries left behind. These are vessels not always visible, yet carried in memory, letters, and logs. They are private ghost ships, floating in the minds and stories of individuals, yet powerful enough to ripple through history. They remind us that the haunting of the sea is not always dramatic or public. Sometimes it is whispered in ink, preserved on paper, and passed quietly from hand to hand.
The most haunting ghost ships are sometimes not those seen adrift on the waves, but those that live in words. Captains' logs, sailors' diaries, and personal letters carry the presence of the sea into human memory, preserving moments that may never have been witnessed by another soul. They are intimate vessels of experience, capturing the fears, hopes, and quiet reflections of those who face the vast, indifferent ocean. In these pages, a ship is both tangible and spectral. The timber and sails are real, but the emotions, the anticipation, the dread, they are ghosts that linger long after the ink has dried. Many maritime historians rely on such documents to reconstruct voyages and disasters, yet even factual accounts can read like ghost stories. The logbook of the Mary Celeste, for example, records routine entries, yet the absence of the crew transforms the mundane into mystery. Each line is a whisper from a past life, a trace of normalcy frozen before disappearance. These records, combined with imagination, allow the ship to exist in two realms at once, a vessel of recorded history and a phantom drifting across human consciousness. Personal letters from sailors add another layer of haunting. Written to family and friends on land, they often describe storms, strange sights, or feelings of unease that seem to foreshadow the unknown. A letter mentioning ghostly lights on the horizon or a silent ship in the mist may seem mundane in context. Yet when a ship disappears, these small observations gain a spectral weight. The sea is patient. It allows such words to drift through time, like messages in bottles, waiting to be discovered, interpreted, and felt anew. The act of reading a captain's log or a sailor's journal is an intimate encounter with a ghost. It is a dialogue across decades, even centuries, between the living and those who have been claimed by the ocean. One can feel the rhythm of the ship through the entries, the listing of hours, the notation of weather, the repeated mention of distant horizons. And then, somewhere between the ink and the paper, a gap appears, a missing date, an abrupt end, and the ghost emerges. The reader is left to fill the silence with imagination, just as sailors once did on lonely nights at sea. Some documents are particularly chilling when they hint at final moments. Consider the diaries of Arctic explorers, whose ships became trapped in ice. Entries describe hope, meticulous planning, and careful navigation, yet also a growing awareness of peril. As the logs continue, the optimism fades, replaced by terse notes about failing provisions, illness, and the cold that bites deeper than any storm. These records become spectral, a step-by-step account of a slow disappearance. The ship itself seems to fade along with the writer, leaving nothing behind but paper and memory. The letters of ordinary sailors, too, carry ghostly resonance. A note describing a ship that moved against the wind, silent, like a shadow, may have been intended as anecdote or superstition. Yet when read long after the voyage, it becomes a portal to mystery. Ghost ships do not require absence or tragedy to haunt. Sometimes, the very perception of the unknown, captured in ink, creates a lingering presence that can persist for generations. These personal records also preserve the human side of ghost ships. In reading the hopes, fears, and mundane details of daily life aboard, one begins to understand the people behind the legends. The crew were not phantoms when alive. They were mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters. Their routines, dreams, and small rituals become amplified after disappearance, a form of haunting that is tender as well as eerie. It is this humanity that allows ghost ships to linger in memory. They are not only vessels on the waves, but also vessels of experience, carrying emotion across time. Some letters and logs even hint at the supernatural, reflecting beliefs that sailors carried. Accounts of strange lights, phantom figures on deck, or a sudden, inexplicable calm in the midst of storm are scattered throughout maritime archives. While modern readers may see them as folklore or misinterpretation, for contemporaries they were as real as the rigging and sails. Such records bridge the line between observation and imagination, fact and myth, anchoring the ghost ship in both the world of history and the world of mystery. The act of preserving these records is, in itself, an attempt to anchor memory in a world defined by impermanence. Ships drift, people vanish, storms erase traces, yet words remain. Logs and letters become ghost ships of a different kind, vessels not for travel, but for remembrance. They carry the voices of the past into the present, whispering of voyages, dangers, and encounters with the unknown. The reader becomes a passenger, drifting alongside those long gone, feeling the sway of the deck and the pull of the wind through the written word. From these personal vessels of memory, the journey turns back to the broader sea. The ghost ships recorded in logs and letters often have counterparts in sightings and folklore. A captain's note of strange sails on the horizon may echo reports from other ships or coastal communities. In this way, private ghosts and public legends intertwine, creating a network of mystery that spans the oceans. Together, they remind us that the sea is never truly silent, and that every ship, whether in ink, in story, or in memory, carries both history and haunting. Next, we drift from personal records to the still more intangible, the psychological pull of ghost ships. How do these vessels, real or imagined, linger in our dreams, shaping fears, fascination, and imagination? The sea's ghosts are not only observed, they are felt, in the quiet hours of night, when the mind drifts as far as the tide. Ghost ships drift not only on the waves, but also in the mind. They inhabit dreams, memories, and the quiet moments of imagination when the sea is distant but never truly gone. Psychologists and historians alike recognize that the human fascination with ghost ships is rooted in both fear and wonder. The open ocean, vast and unpredictable, evokes a sense of insignificance, and ghost ships crystallize that unease into tangible forms. They are projections of anxiety, longing, and curiosity, taking shape as silent vessels sailing into our consciousness. Even in waking life, the idea of a ship adrift without a crew provokes tension. It is a liminal image, the familiar combined with the uncanny. Timber and sail are recognizable, yet the absence of human life transforms the ordinary into something eerie. This duality, familiarity and strangeness, is central to the psychological impact of ghost ships. Humans are drawn to such images because they challenge understanding. We know ships are meant to carry people. When that expectation is subverted, the mind responds with heightened attention, mixing apprehension with fascination. Dreams of ghost ships often mirror these anxieties. Sailors, explorers, and ordinary people alike report seeing vessels in misty seas, sometimes approaching, sometimes receding, always shrouded in ambiguity. In dreams, these ships may carry different meanings. They can represent unresolved journeys, forgotten responsibilities, or the passage of time itself. The empty decks echo the dreamer's own feelings of isolation or the fear of being lost in a vast, uncontrollable environment. The ghost ship becomes a symbol for forces beyond control, both external and internal, tangible and metaphorical. There is also a deeply human need to personify uncertainty. The sea, with its storms and unpredictability, can be overwhelming. Ghost ships offer a way to engage with that uncertainty. By envisioning a vessel with intention, a captain, and crew, even if spectral, we give form to chaos. In psychology, this is known as projection. The mind externalizes internal fear into an object or scenario. The ghost ship becomes a canvas on which the subconscious paints its anxieties and curiosities, making the unknowable feel, if not controllable, at least understandable. Cultural reinforcement amplifies this effect. Stories of ghost ships are passed down through generations, each retelling sharpening the imagery, sails glowing in fog, hulls creaking silently, lights blinking like distant eyes. These stories prime the mind to notice patterns in natural phenomena, mist, waves, distant vessels, and interpret them as supernatural. Even modern sailors, conditioned by centuries of tales, report fleeting sightings that echo earlier legends. In this way, the ghost ship exists simultaneously in the real and imagined worlds, shaped as much by culture as by observation. Fear, however, is only part of the allure. Ghost ships also evoke awe and curiosity. The idea of a vessel wandering endlessly, immune to the passage of time, appeals to a human fascination with immortality and mystery. In a world where most journeys have a beginning and an end, ghost ships resist closure. They are eternal travelers, carriers of untold stories, suspended between life and absence. Dreams of them are not always frightening. They can inspire reflection, wonder, and even a gentle melancholy, the kind that lingers when staring out at a twilight sea. Artists and writers have long drawn upon this psychological resonance. From 19th-century maritime novels to modern documentaries, ghost ships are depicted as liminal spaces, bridges between life and death, reality and imagination. Visual depictions often emphasize isolation, a single vessel against a vast horizon, a faint glow in the mist, the suggestion of life absent. Such imagery reinforces the mental patterns that make ghost ships compelling. The contrast between known and unknown, presence and absence, safety and danger. The psychology of ghost ships, in essence, is an interplay between perception, expectation, and emotion. Interestingly, ghost ships also serve a cognitive purpose. They allow the mind to explore uncertainty safely. By imagining a ship lost at sea, we confront danger and mortality at a distance. We process fear without exposure to real risk. In this sense, ghost ships act as mental rehearsals, enabling reflection on loss, change, and impermanence. The vessels become symbolic training grounds for the imagination, teaching lessons about vigilance, respect for nature, and the fragility of life. Even in the modern era, when satellite tracking and advanced navigation make ships less likely to vanish entirely, ghost ships continue to haunt collective consciousness. Reports of derelict vessels, drifting freighters, and abandoned yachts are received with the same mixture of curiosity and unease as centuries ago. The mind, conditioned by the long history of ghost ship narratives, fills in the gaps. It imagines the unseen crew, the abandoned cargo, the silent decks, transforming a mundane sighting into a psychological experience that mirrors ancient maritime legends. Ghost ships, therefore, are not just historical or folkloric phenomena, they are mental landscapes. They exist in the space between fear and fascination, reality and imagination. They are vessels of thought, carrying human emotion, memory, and cultural context across the sea of consciousness. In this sense, every sighting, story, or dream of a ghost ship is as much about the observer as the observed, a reflection of the human need to navigate uncertainty, mortality, and mystery. As we leave the psychological realm, our journey returns to the material world of maritime discovery. Ghost ships, once only imagined or feared, are now found in records, wrecks, and museums, bridging the gap between legend and reality. From dreams and nightmares, we drift toward the evidence that haunts the ocean, the vessels, artifacts, and histories that preserve memory across centuries. For centuries, ghost ships existed primarily in stories, logs, and the misty imagination of sailors and coastal dwellers. Yet as technology advanced and maritime archaeology matured, many of these phantom vessels began to reveal themselves in concrete ways. Rediscovery transforms legend into tangible history, allowing researchers to explore the line between myth and reality. Wrecks once whispered about in taverns and coastal villages now lie mapped on sonar, photographed by submersibles, and studied for their construction, cargo, and human stories. These rediscovered ghost ships provide a bridge between imagination and fact, revealing the hidden lives of vessels that once drifted between both. Consider the discovery of the HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, the ships of Sir John Franklin's doomed expedition. Lost in the Arctic in 1845, the fate of Franklin and his crew was shrouded in mystery for over a century. Inuit oral histories preserved fragments of the story, while expeditions searched fruitlessly for clues. In 2014 and 2016, however, Both wrecks were located using modern sonar and underwater imaging. The ship's skeletal remains, frozen in time beneath the ice, confirmed parts of the legend but also revealed new layers of history, evidence of navigation struggles, the crew's attempts at survival, and the harsh conditions that shaped their final days. In this sense, rediscovery gave physical form to stories that had existed for generations only in memory and myth. The rediscovery of merchant and cargo vessels has similarly illuminated maritime history. The Mary Rose, Henry VIII's flagship, sank in 1545 and lay hidden for over 4 centuries. When divers finally raised her hull in 1982, the ship emerged as a window into 16th-century naval warfare, daily life aboard a Tudor warship, and the lives of sailors lost to the sea. Artifacts preserved in the cold water, cannons, tools, personal belongings, offered an unprecedented glimpse of history while carrying the aura of the ghost ship. What had once haunted imagination as a tale of sudden disappearance became a tangible connection to the people and technology of the past. Even smaller, less famous vessels offer haunting rediscoveries. The SS Valencia, wrecked off the coast of Vancouver Island in 1906, had inspired decades of ghost ship sightings. Modern exploration of the wreck confirmed the treacherous nature of the Goodwin Sands, revealing the ship's battered hull and the physical realities of her loss. Yet the mystery remained intact in some ways. The accounts of ghostly sightings, sometimes decades later, could not be fully explained by physical evidence alone. Here, rediscovery intertwines fact and folklore, showing how ghost ships occupy both worlds simultaneously. Research also sheds light on why ghost ships persisted in legend. Many reports that once seemed inexplicable, ships seen adrift without crews, glowing lights on foggy nights, now can be understood through a combination of maritime knowledge and environmental science. Fog banks, optical illusions, drifting debris, and abandoned vessels all contribute to sightings that once fueled the imagination. Yet while research demystifies some aspects, it does not diminish the emotional and cultural power of ghost ships. Indeed, uncovering a ship's remains often heightens its allure, as the human mind fills gaps in the story with the same or in speculation that inspired earlier legends. Modern technology, side-scan sonar, remotely operated submersibles, and underwater drones, has expanded the scope of discovery exponentially. Wrecks that were previously inaccessible due to depth or dangerous currents can now be examined in detail, revealing not only the ship itself but also traces of cargo, crew, and the circumstances of its sinking. For example, underwater exploration of Caribbean trade ships has revealed their routes, their cargoes of sugar, rum, and goods, and occasionally the remains of sailors lost in storms or piracy. Each discovery adds factual weight to the ghostly narratives, confirming that real people once sailed these spectral vessels. Museums and exhibitions play a crucial role in connecting rediscovery with public imagination. Artifacts recovered from ghost ships are displayed alongside interpretive storytelling, blending history with the lingering mystery of their tales. Visitors can see the rusted hulls, preserved timbers, and personal effects, while hearing accounts of sightings and disappearances that inspired folklore. In this way, rediscovered ghost ships continue to haunt the human imagination, now bolstered by evidence yet retaining the poetry of legend. Moreover, rediscovery is not always about locating wrecks physically. It also involves tracing their histories through records, logs, and maritime archives. Researchers can reconstruct voyages, identify crew members, and understand the conditions that led to a ship's disappearance. Each new piece of evidence transforms the ghost ship from a vague concept into a vessel with known dimensions, human agency, and historical context. Yet even as mysteries are solved, the sense of awe remains. The ships are reminders of the ocean's power, human courage, and the fragile boundary between survival and disappearance. Rediscovery also prompts reflection on the nature of memory and storytelling. Ghost ships survive because humans cannot let them go. Even centuries-old wrecks continue to stir imagination, inspiring books, films, and documentaries. They act as conduits between past and present, showing that history is not merely dates and facts, but also emotion, perception, and shared wonder. By uncovering physical remains, researchers validate the stories that have floated through folklore while preserving the mystery that makes them compelling. In this way, rediscovered ghost ships are not merely historical artifacts. They are living symbols. They embody the intersection of fact and imagination, tragedy and beauty, fear and fascination. Whether seen in a sonar image, explored by divers, or displayed in a museum, they retain the qualities that have captivated generations. Silent vessels adrift between worlds, carrying the stories of those who sailed them, the weight of the sea, and the echo of human memory. From the cold, quiet depths, we now turn to the broader cultural impact of ghost ships. How have these vessels shaped literature, music, art, and collective imagination? The rediscovery of their physical remains strengthens their presence in human culture, ensuring that ghost ships remain not only underwater but also in our minds.
Ghost ships have long sailed beyond the horizon of reality into the boundless ocean of human imagination. From the earliest maritime folklore to modern cinema, these spectral vessels have inspired artists, writers, and musicians to explore the tension between the known and unknown, the seen and unseen. Their allure lies in duality, tangible enough to anchor in memory, yet mysterious enough to drift freely through dreams and imagination. The stories, paintings, and melodies they inspire allow ghost ships to exist in multiple realms at once: historical, psychological, and symbolic. In literature, ghost ships appear in both cautionary tales and fantastical adventure. Writers of the 18th and 19th centuries, fascinated by maritime exploration, wove narratives of cursed vessels and doomed crews into novels and poems. Samuel Taylor Coleridge's famous The Rime of the Ancient Mariner is a quintessential example, blending the supernatural with human guilt and the vast, unpredictable sea. The ship itself becomes a character, a silent witness to the consequences of hubris and the fragility of life. Such literary depictions reinforce the ghost ship as a vessel of morality, warning, and wonder, allowing readers to experience the isolation, suspense, and melancholy of the sea from the safety of land. Painting and visual art have similarly captured ghost ships' eerie beauty. Maritime artists, from the Romantic period to contemporary illustrators, depict vessels emerging from fog, bathed in moonlight, or adrift among storm-tossed waves. These images often emphasize contrast, light and shadow, calm and chaos, presence and absence, to evoke the emotional resonance of the ghost ship. For instance, dramatic depictions of ships lost in tempestuous seas highlight human vulnerability while romanticizing the allure of endless wandering. Viewers are invited to contemplate both the historical reality of maritime life and the poetic mystery that ghost ships embody. Music, too, carries the haunting essence of these vessels. From sea shanties to orchestral compositions, melodies convey the loneliness, danger, and melancholy of life at sea. Some songs recount shipwrecks, strange sightings, or legendary voyages, turning the stories of ghost ships into auditory experiences. The repetition of rhythm, the rise and fall of crescendos, and the echoing of harmonies mimic the movement of waves and the sway of a ship, engaging listeners in a subtle, almost hypnotic way. Through sound, ghost ships drift directly into imagination, bypassing the need for visual or textual representation, yet still carrying a deep emotional weight. Film and modern media have expanded the reach of ghost ships even further. From early silent films to contemporary cinema, ghost ships are depicted as both thrilling and unsettling, often combining historical reference with supernatural speculation. Movies portray phantom vessels rising from fog, crews frozen in time, or doomed captains steering endlessly. While cinematic ghost ships are dramatized, they tap into the same psychological resonance explored in dreams and folklore. Audiences experience awe and fear, reminded of the ocean's majesty and unpredictability, and of humanity's enduring fascination with what lies beyond perception. Folklore, however, remains at the heart of ghost ships' cultural echo. Communities along coasts have long told stories of spectral vessels appearing at dawn or dusk, carrying messages, warnings, or omens. These narratives are oral artifacts, passed through generations, preserving memory in the same way that wrecks preserve timber and iron. Each retelling adds layers of interpretation and imagination, and over time, ghost ships become shared symbols of mystery, danger, and continuity. The blending of real incidents, personal accounts, and creative embellishment ensures that ghost ships persist in culture as both historical traces and mythic presences. Even in contemporary literature and digital media, ghost ships maintain a compelling duality. Some works emphasize historical accuracy, exploring shipwrecks and maritime disasters in detail, while others embrace pure fantasy, crafting spectral vessels with mysterious powers and enigmatic motives. Yet in every instance, the core fascination remains: the interplay between absence and presence, mortality and endurance, reality and imagination. Ghost ships continue to inspire reflection on human ambition, curiosity, and the limits imposed by the natural world. Artistic representations also capture the liminality of ghost ships, their status between life and death, memory and imagination. Paintings, poems, and music emphasize the threshold quality of these vessels. Half-submerged, drifting at the edge of vision, glowing in mist, or lost in storm. They remind audiences that ghost ships exist at borders, between day and night, calm and tempest, certainty and mystery. This liminality mirrors the psychological experience of humans encountering the unknown, reinforcing why these ships continue to haunt collective consciousness. Through centuries, ghost ships have evolved from real maritime tragedies into symbols that traverse history, folklore, art, and media. Rediscovered wrecks feed imagination. Logs and letters preserve memory, and legends passed through time inspire creation across disciplines. Together, they form a web of cultural echoes, ensuring that the spectral presence of ships at sea, whether seen, dreamed, or imagined, remains alive. These vessels carry not only cargo and crew, but also the enduring human fascination with mystery, isolation, and the endless horizon. As we prepare to drift toward the final reflection, we leave the wide canvas of culture and turn inward. The stories, sightings, and rediscoveries converge into a meditation on impermanence, memory, and wonder. Ghost ships, after all, are not only tales of the sea. They are mirrors of human curiosity and the delicate balance between what we know and what remains just beyond reach. As we drift toward the close of our voyage, the ghost ships of history, legend, and imagination gather around us, silent yet resonant. They are more than vessels of timber, sails, and iron. They are carriers of memory, emotion, and the enduring human fascination with the unknown. In tracing their paths, from the Arctic ice to sunlit coasts, from captain's logs to misty dreams, we see that ghost ships exist simultaneously in fact and imagination, in absence and presence, in the visible and invisible. They remind us that the sea is not merely water and waves, but a repository of stories, a mirror reflecting human courage, folly, hope, and wonder. Ghost ships speak to the liminal spaces of our experience. They inhabit thresholds between life and death, land and sea, history and myth. This liminality is precisely what makes them compelling and enduring. A ship adrift, empty yet intact, evokes a quiet tension, the ordinary transformed into the uncanny. It is a reminder that human existence is fragile, and that the natural world, vast and impartial, preserves both evidence and enigma. Through this quiet tension, the mind is invited to wander, to imagine, and to contemplate both the beauty and danger of exploration. Perhaps the most poignant lesson of ghost ships is the way they connect generations. From coastal villagers recounting lantern-lit apparitions to modern researchers discovering wrecks frozen beneath ice or submerged in warm seas, these vessels bridge centuries. They carry the names and stories of those who sailed them, preserving memory long after lives and voyages have ended. The ships themselves, whether imagined or real, function as time capsules. They hold fragments of human experience, technical skill, emotion, and culture, drifting through history like silent messengers. Psychologically, ghost ships remind us of the power of imagination. They illustrate how humans interpret uncertainty, confront fear, and transform absence into narrative. From dreams of phantom vessels to the eerie echo of a distant mast in fog, ghost ships tap into a deep need to understand, to personify, and to give shape to what is otherwise unknowable. They are reminders that imagination is both a tool for survival and a source of wonder, helping us navigate the uncertainties of life just as sailors navigate the perils of the sea. Culturally, ghost ships continue to inspire reflection, art, and storytelling. They inhabit literature, painting, music, and film, maintaining the delicate balance between fear and beauty, history and myth. They invite us to consider the impermanence of human endeavor and the resilience of memory. Rediscovered wrecks, personal letters, coastal legends, and psychological echoes converge into a rich tapestry that extends beyond the ocean itself into the realm of thought and imagination. Each story, sighting, or dream reinforces the haunting power of these vessels, ensuring that they remain alive in collective consciousness. Even as we conclude, the sea does not release its hold entirely. Ghost ships remind us of the unseen forces that shape life and history, the storms, currents, and human choices that alter destinies in ways both profound and subtle. They teach patience, reflection, and reverence, suggesting that not all knowledge is meant to be grasped fully. Sometimes, the allure lies precisely in the mystery, in the questions that drift endlessly along with the vessels themselves. In the gentle quiet of night, when the mind is free to wander, ghost ships serve as guides through memory, curiosity, and imagination. They encourage us to embrace uncertainty with calm attentiveness, to appreciate both the fragility and endurance of human endeavor, and to marvel at the ocean's boundless expanse. They are companions for reflection, not threats, reminders of wonder, not terror. In their silent drift, they carry the poetry of history, the echoes of lost lives, and the soft hum of mystery that never fully departs. As your thoughts settle, envision the phantom sails fading into the twilight horizon, the waves whispering beneath them, the decks empty yet resonant with memory. These ghost ships, whether glimpsed in dreams, remembered from coastal stories, or uncovered in rediscovery, are more than spectral vessels. They are enduring symbols of humanity's relationship with the sea, the unknown, and the stories we tell ourselves. They linger quietly, like a lullaby of the ocean, a gentle reminder that mystery and memory coexist, drifting together just beyond the horizon. In this way, the ghost ships of history become companions for reflection, urging calm curiosity, deep wonder, and gentle imagination. They remind us that even in absence, there is presence. Even in silence, there is story. As we close our journey, they leave us with the soft echo of sails, the quiet rhythm of waves, and the enduring knowledge that some mysteries, like the sea itself, are meant to be savored slowly, drifted upon, and carried gently into the mind and heart.